What would you do if your name was erased from the very history you built because your skin didn't fit their marketing image? They rewrote the story. But this time, he wrote the ending. Langston Merritt didn't walk into that ballroom expecting applause. He'd written the speech. He'd helped coordinate the guest list. He'd even trained the young staffers on how to pronounce veteran entrepreneur without tripping over their words. But what he didn't expect was silence. 10 years. That's how long it had been since he and Colonel Graham Whitlock Sr. first dreamed up the idea to build a national forum honoring veterans who became entrepreneurs after service. It was supposed to level the playing field. Show the world that patriotism came in every shade, every story. That night, the chandelier shimmered, the orchestra played softly in the background, and a massive projection screen lit up with the title. Founders of the Forum, A Decade of Vision. 3 faces appeared. None of them were his. Lang sat near the back, hands folded quietly in his lap, as the crowd stood in ovation for the visionaries who made it all possible. Mason Whitlock Jr., all polished smiles and tailored suit, took the stage to accept a crystal plaque on behalf of his father and the original founding team. The original team. Lang's chest didn't tighten. His eyes didn't well up. He'd served long enough to control that. But something inside him went very still. Because he remembered he was the one who designed the first prototype website from his tiny apartment in Newark. He was the one who called every state-level veterans coalition to build the early support network. He was the one who introduced Colonel Whitlock to their first major sponsor. And now, his name wasn't even whispered. No thank you. No honorable mention. Not even a typo. The first time Langston Merritt was asked to step aside, it wasn't a demand. Not exactly. It came wrapped in courtesy. In the kind of language that left no fingerprints. It was a meeting. Small, informal. Just Lang, Mason Whitlock Jr., and an untouched pot of coffee that went cold on the table between them. They sat in one of the forum's glass-walled conference rooms, the kind Lang had once helped design. Clean lines, patriotic tones, sunlight filtering in like truth was something you could frame. Mason leaned forward, elbows resting lightly on the table like he was still a kid pretending to be in charge. He smiled. A polished, press-ready smile. The kind that looked good in donor brochures. We've been thinking a lot about branding, he said. About how to make the forum more accessible. Lang didn't move. Just watched him. The young man continued, still smiling. Optics matter, Mason said, quieter now. Our new media partners have suggested we simplify the founding story. Streamline the image. Lang's hands stayed folded. One thumb moved slightly, tracing the edge of a callus from a long-retired rifle grip. What does that mean? He asked, no sharpness in his voice. Just air that didn't move fast. Mason hesitated. Just long enough. We're thinking of shifting you to a legacy role. Senior advisor. Quiet presence. Behind the scenes. Lang glanced out the window. Across the street, a city worker swept leaves into a pile that kept blowing back into the street. He nodded once, slowly. And the part where I co-founded this thing? Mason's smile wavered. Of course. Internally, you'll always be one of us. But for the public, simplicity sells. Lang didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't point to the server room 2 floors down that still ran the system he built from scratch. Or the policies he wrote. or the founding deck still stored on the Google Drive under his name. He just looked back at Mason. And for a moment, there was no glass wall between them. Just a long silence, filled with everything Mason didn't know how to say. Lang stood, smoothed the front of his jacket. His fingertips paused briefly on the edge of the table. Then let go. "You'll want to correct the spelling on the press release," he said on his way out. "It's Langston. With a G dot." Mason didn't reply. The door clicked shut behind him. The sound barely registered over the hum of the fluorescent lights. Lang walked past the receptionist, nodded gently, and stepped into the elevator without a word. He pressed the lobby button with the knuckle of his index finger. And as the door slid closed, his reflection looked back at him, still standing tall, but just a little farther from the frame. Lang didn't check the website often. There wasn't much reason to. He wasn't in charge of updates anymore, and most of the public-facing work had been handed off quietly, like a cup set down on a countertop no one wanted to mark. But that morning, he clicked through. Not out of suspicion. Just habit. The homepage had changed. A sleeker layout. Glossy photos. Language that leaned more corporate than communal. The kind of voice that called veteran stakeholders and service value add. He scrolled slowly, each flick of the mouse wheel feeling more like a test than a task. Under our founders, 3 names were listed. His wasn't one of them. No announcement. No archives tribute. Just absence, dressed in clean design. He read it twice. Then again. There was no typo. No oversight. Just a sentence that began, "The forum was built by 3 visionary veterans." He closed the browser without rushing. His hand hovered briefly above the mouse before pulling away. Later that day, Denise Holloway knocked gently on his office door. She carried a folder, and something else, something not written down. Lang nodded for her to come in. "They published the Q3 Media Kit," she said, setting the folder on his desk. "You're not in it. Not even in the internal copy." She didn't sit. Just stood with one hand resting on the back of a chair, her nails tapping the fabric once, then stopping. Lang looked at the folder but didn't open it. "You knew?" she asked softly. He gave a slow blink. Not an answer, but close enough. There was a pause, the kind that makes a room feel larger than it is. "If you want," she began, "I could speak to Mason. Or to his father." Lang shook his head once. Not sharply. Just enough to quiet the offer. "They've already spoken," he said. Denise stayed a moment longer. Then she stepped back, pulling the door closed with a care that made the hinge sound louder than it was. The afternoon passed in quiet tasks. Email drafts. Data backups. A sticky note on his desk that read "Call Terry Ree, hosting." When he left that evening, he paused in the hallway by the display case. The one with the original forum charter framed behind glass. A gold plate listed the founding team. Someone had replaced it. The old version, with his name, was gone. Lang didn't touch the glass. Just stood there. His reflection layered over the words. Then he turned and walked out, the sound of his footsteps swallowed by the hallway carpet. Lang packed his office one drawer at a time. Not because there was much to take, just that some things deserved quiet hands. A framed photo of the early days, him, Denise, and Colonel Whitlock Sr., seated around a folding table with coffee cups and laptops. No suits. No media. Just plans drawn in pencil and faith. He slid the frame gently into a box lined with newspaper. The nameplate from his desk, engraved brass, edges dulled from years of fingertips, he held a moment longer. Then turned it over, metal against palm, before placing it beneath a folded sweatshirt from the first forum conference. It was late morning, but the hallway outside his office was still. The usual sounds, printer hums, muted chatter, footsteps, felt held back, like even the building wasn't sure what to say. When Lang stepped out with the small cardboard box, Denise stood by the elevator. She wasn't holding anything. Just standing, arms crossed loosely, her thumb brushing along the edge of her watchband. They didn't speak. Not right away. He nodded to her once. She gave a faint nod back. That was all. A junior staffer passed by. Young man in a fitted blue blazer, name tag tilted. He offered Lang a polite smile, the kind reserved for guests, maybe new vendors. Lang stepped into the elevator alone. The doors closed with a soft sigh. He didn't press the lobby button immediately. Just stood there, box in hand, watching the numbers glow, floor by floor, as if waiting to be sure the moment belonged to him. Downstairs, the reception desk was empty. The security guard, Joe, was on a call but paused mid-sentence when he saw Lang. He offered a small wave. Lang returned it. No words exchanged. Outside, the air had turned. A colder breeze, the kind that moved through suit jackets and found the space between shirt buttons. He paused under the flagpole out front, eyes resting on the banner that read, National Forum of Veteran Entrepreneurs, Building from Service. He stood there a moment longer. Not to admire it. Not to mourn it. Just to mark it. A place he had built, a name he no longer stood behind. At the curb, a rideshare waited, a gray sedan, back window cracked half an inch. Lang opened the door, set the box on the seat beside him, and slid in. As the car pulled away, the forum building grew smaller in the side mirror. Then it was gone. He didn't look back. His left hand rested on the edge of the box, fingers lightly drumming against the cardboard. Nothing rushed. Nothing broken. Just the quiet of someone who knew what he had given and what had been taken. And who would never confuse the two again. 3 days after Langston Merritt walked away, the first call came in from finance. A permissions issue, someone couldn't access the donor tracking dashboard. By the end of the week, for more departments reported system errors, data mismatches, missing backups, silent failures in the form processing tool. No one panicked. Not at first. They called IT. Then the software vendor. Then back to IT. Each answer led to another question. The forum staff, most of them too new to remember the early structure, assumed it was a simple update glitch. But the foundation didn't crack. It just stopped responding. The system Lang had built wasn't flashy. It didn't come with a logo or a glossy PDF. It wasn't designed for attention, it was designed to hold weight. Cross-referencing applications with military service records. Linking grant cycles to legal compliance timelines. Predicting fundraising patterns based on regional veteran data. Quiet tools for real work. No one ever asked how it all connected. They just pressed the buttons. And now, nothing worked quite right. Mason Whitlock Jr. called a meeting on Monday. 11 people around the table. None of them had built what they were now trying to fix. Denise Holloway sat near the end, arms folded. She didn't speak. Just listened. The consulting firm Mason hired offered a proposal. Replace the platform with something cloud-based. Cheaper. Scalable. Easy to train. They used words like frictionless and seamless. But when asked if it could recover the records from the last 6 years, the room went quiet. The consultant shifted in his seat. That data may not be formatted in a retrievable way without direct context. Mason leaned back in his chair. His hand moved toward his water glass but stopped short of lifting it. Outside the window, the sun moved slowly across the brick facade of the building next door. The light fell across the conference table in a narrow stripe too short to reach the head of the table, just enough to touch the edge of Denise's notepad. Later that afternoon, Denise typed slowly, deliberately, searching for something she already suspected didn't exist. There was no backup of Lang's context files. No off-site record of his tagging system. No documentation on how the logic layers worked. The platform still ran, but it was hollow now. Form without frame. Steps without ground. From the hallway, someone asked if she was going to the staff happy hour. She didn't answer. Instead, she clicked the last folder open, looked at the blank metadata fields, then closed her laptop. She sat there for a long moment. Still. Both hands resting lightly on the lid, not pressing down. As if the weight of absence could be felt through plastic. And as if she knew it could. Lang received the email just after noon. The subject line was short, "Let's talk opportunity," and the sender was Mason Whitlock Jr. It came through clean. No long apology. No admission. Just a line or two asking if Lang would be open to a meeting. There was a suggestion of lunch. Mason even offered a place, some new bistro near the office, all reclaimed wood and quiet jazz. Lang didn't reply. Not right away. He waited until the next morning. Then typed back a single sentence. "I'm available tomorrow at 2. Somewhere quiet." They met at a small diner 3 blocks from Union Station. Nothing fancy. Vinyl booths. The kind of place where the napkin dispensers still rattled when touched. Lang was already seated when Mason arrived. The younger man wore a dark blazer and an expression that tried to strike balance, something between familiarity and formality. He extended his hand across the table. Lang shook it once, briefly. They didn't order right away. The server brought water, menus, and left them in silence. Mason cleared his throat. Then leaned in slightly, elbows just brushing the edge of the laminate table. "There's been some difficulty," he said. Lang waited. "We've had issues with the platform. Nothing irreversible. But gaps. Things we didn't realize were built into the system until they weren't." Lang didn't blink. His hands rested on the table, fingers loosely linked, thumbs unmoving. "We'd like you to come back in an advisory role," Mason continued. "Short term. Just to stabilize things." Lang looked past him, toward the window. Outside, a delivery truck idled beside the curb, brake lights glowing faintly in the shade. "We can offer a flexible contract," Mason added. Quiet. No titles. Just support. That word. It landed without volume. "Just wait." Lang turned his eyes back to Mason. "Not sharp. Just steady." "I built that system to last," he said, voice low, even. You removed the hands that understood how it worked. Mason shifted, sat straighter, smiled, but it didn't reach far. We're willing to compensate fairly. You'd have access again. Quiet credit, if you'd like. Lang set his napkin down beside his glass. Folded. No name on the website, he said. No press release. But you'd use my work to keep your name clean. It's not about that, Mason said, too quickly. Lang didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small notebook. Thin, bound in soft leather, corners worn. He opened it slowly, flipped to a blank page, and wrote down a name. Then a number. Then a second name. He slid the notebook across the table. Just enough for Mason to see. You want a system that runs, Lang said. You hire the people who understand what it means to serve. Not the ones who just inherit it. Mason didn't speak. Lang stood. Buttoned his coat. Nodded once, without warmth or anger. You don't need my silence, he said quietly. You need my memory. But that's not for sale. Then he turned and left the diner. The door shut gently behind him. The bell above it barely rang. Lang didn't launch anything with fanfare. There was no countdown, no press release, no video with fading music and glowing words. Just a simple website, clean, bare, direct. Valornet. The name sat quietly at the top of the page, in a typeface you didn't notice until you realized how calm it made the space feel. Beneath it, just 10 words. For those who served and were nearly erased. He didn't list himself as founder. Not on the homepage. Not on the About tab. But Denise knew. Terry knew. And the veterans who reached out within the first week, they knew too. The first message came from a man in Atlanta. Then a woman from St. Louis. A small nonprofit in Baltimore asked if Valornet could help them rebuild their outreach tools. Each email different. But they all began the same way. I remember what you built. Lang answered every one. He didn't rush. Some days he sent 3 replies. Some days none. He worked from the quiet corner of his apartment, at a table that faced the window. Morning light came in soft, and by late afternoon, shadows from the blinds cut clean across the hardwood. Denise joined him part-time at first. Then full-time. She didn't ask for a title either. She just showed up with her laptop, a paper folder, and the calm certainty of someone who had already chosen a side. Terry Vaughn stepped in 2 weeks later. Not with promises. Just support that knew how to carry weight. He offered server space. Quiet funding. A trusted name when Lang needed one. By the end of the month, Valornet had 3 grant requests approved. 5 state partnerships pending. And more than 70 veteran entrepreneurs had registered, most of them black or brown or forgotten in between the rows of boardroom photos elsewhere. One afternoon, Lang received a package. No note. No return address. Just a small, heavy box wrapped in brown paper. Inside, a brass nameplate. Polished. Familiar. The edges still dull from age, but the lettering newly cleaned. Langston Merritt, Systems Architect. He didn't smile. But he sat with it for a long time. Didn't move. The plate stayed on the table until sunset, catching the warm orange light across its edge. He didn't place it anywhere yet. He just let it sit. Let it return to the room that had held everything else in silence. And for the first time in months, the silence didn't feel like something missing. It felt like something earned. Something coming back on its own terms. The event was small. Just a community gathering room in Southeast DC, with folding chairs, a simple podium, and a flag pinned to the wall, not on a pole, just taped to the brick with quiet reverence. They called it a showcase. Not a ceremony. No stage. No cameras. Just people sitting shoulder to shoulder, coats folded on their laps, listening to each other tell hard-earned stories of building something after service. Something that didn't wear medals but still mattered. Lang sat near the back. Not hidden. Just outside the circle of attention. Until a young man stepped up to the mic. His blazer was a little too big. The sleeves fell past the wrist. But he stood tall. Hands steady on the sides of the lectern. Eyes scanning the room slowly, as if anchoring himself to every person there. "My name is Elijah Banks," he said. "Eli, for short. I served 6 years. Got out. Tried to start over. People told me, build a business like the veterans on TV. But I didn't look like them. Didn't talk like them." He paused. "Then I found ValorNet." A quiet stir moved through the room. Heads turned. A few glanced toward the back, toward Lang, but he didn't shift in his seat. "I didn't just find funding," Eli continued. "I found history. I found someone who didn't need to say much, because the way he built this thing told me everything." He looked up, gaze steady. "I never met a man who taught more by standing still." There was no applause. Not yet. Just stillness. Afterward, as chairs scraped gently against the floor and the crowd began to thin, Eli walked straight to Lang. They didn't shake hands. Eli just stood in front of him, nodded once, and said, "Thank you for not disappearing." Lang looked at him. No words. Just a quiet return of the nod. Later that night, Denise and Terry helped stack chairs. Lang lingered by the door, coat folded over one arm. A volunteer approached, an older woman with silver hair pulled tight, clipboard in hand. "Sir," she said gently, "we're adding names to the founding board of ValorNet. The real one. For the archive." Lang didn't answer right away. She held up a small placard, the kind they used in community centers to label display cases. "We'd like your permission." He looked down at it. Plain white background. Simple black type. Langston Merritt, founder, ValorNet. He touched the edge with 2 fingers. Then gave the smallest nod. No signature. No speech. Just that. The woman placed it on the table. And something in the room shifted. Not loud. But final. Like a door that had stayed open too long, gently finding its frame again. Sometimes, the loudest legacies are written in silence. Langston Merritt never demanded recognition. He didn't raise his voice when they erased his name, nor did he retaliate when they asked him to step aside. Instead, he built something lasting, quietly. ValorNet wasn't just a platform. It was a quiet refusal to disappear. It stood for every black veteran who had been labeled support and overlooked, yet carried systems that no one else could replace. And when a younger vet spoke Lang's name, not out of pity but out of respect, it reminded us, real leadership doesn't always stand at the podium. Sometimes, it sits in the back row, steady, watching, still shaping the room. The story of Lang teaches us that dignity doesn't shout, it endures. Even when applause is denied, even when names are left off programs, character speaks for itself. And one day, someone will notice. Someone will speak that name out loud again. Speech balloon. Have you ever seen someone quietly hold everything together and never ask for credit? Backhand index pointing down. Tell us in the comments. Well, if this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to Black Veteran Stories, where names like Langston Merritt are never forgotten.